Hey star-crossed souls, ready to risk everything for a love no law can allow. Tonight, under the blood moon's crimson gaze, two hearts will collide across the most dangerous boundary in the supernatural world, the divide between enemy packs. When ancient hatred meets undeniable attraction, when duty wars with desire, some loves are meant to be hidden in the shadows, but can they survive the light? Chapter 1. The scent hit me first. Wild cedar and storm winds, dangerous and intoxicating. My wolf stirred restlessly beneath my skin as I crouched in the undergrowth at the edge of Silverpaw territory, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I couldn't. Not when my little sister's life hung in the balance. Please, I whispered to the darkness, my breath forming silver clouds in the frigid air. Someone has to be out there. The Moonhaven pack had healing herbs that could save Luna from the silver poisoning coursing through her veins, a gift from the trap one of my own Shadowcrest wolves had carelessly triggered. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd spent generations perfecting weapons to kill our enemies, only for one of our own to fall victim to our paranoia. I pressed deeper into the neutral zone between our territories, that thin strip of no man's land where neither pack dared claim dominance. Ancient oaks towered overhead, their branches creating a canopy so thick that even the blood moon's light struggled to penetrate. Here, in this forgotten space, the old laws meant nothing. A twig snapped behind me. I spun, my heart hammering against my ribs as a figure emerged from the shadows.
Male. Tall.
And definitely not Shadowcrest. Even in human form, he moved with the predatory grace of a born alpha, each step calculated and silent. Moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, high cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of liquid amber that seemed to see straight through me. Dark hair fell across his forehead in waves that my fingers ached to touch. Enemy. Moonhaven. Forbidden. The warnings echoed in my head, but my traitorous body had other ideas. Heat pooled low in my belly as a scent wrapped around me like a caress, cedar and storms and something uniquely, devastatingly him. You're on the wrong side of the border, Shadowcrest. His voice was whiskey and smoke, sending shivers down my spine, even as the pack name fell from his lips like a curse. I lifted my chin, drawing on every lesson in dominance my father had beaten into me. I'm in neutral territory. Same as you. Nothing about you is neutral, sweetheart. He stepped closer, and I caught the flash of fangs as he smiled. Not threatening, appreciative. As if he liked what he saw despite every reason he shouldn't. I have a name. I'm sure you do. But giving it to me would be unwise. Another step. Close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. Just like being here is unwise. For both of us. He was right, and we both knew it. If my father discovered I'd crossed into neutral territory to beg help from our enemies, he'd drag me back to Shadowcrest in chains. If this stranger's pack found out he'd been talking to me instead of tearing out my throat, I need your help. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, desperation making me reckless. My sister, she's dying. Silver poisoning. Your pack has white sage, doesn't it? The kind that grows on Moonhaven land. His expression shifted, amber eyes sharpening with interest. Why would I help a Shadowcrest wolf? Because beneath all this hatred, we're still the same species. Because an innocent girl is going to die if I don't get that herb. Because I swallowed hard, my wolf pressing against my skin as his scent grew stronger. Because maybe some things are more important than old grudges. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt exposed under that golden gaze, as if he could see every secret I'd ever kept. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, almost gentle. What's your name? I hesitated. Names had power, especially between enemies. To give him mine would be to cross a line I could never uncross. Sera, I whispered. Sera. The way he said it, like a prayer or a promise, made my knees weak. I'm Kai.
Kai.
Of course it would be something strong and beautiful, something that would haunt my dreams long after tonight ended. Will you help me? I asked, hating how vulnerable I sounded. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might refuse. Then, without a word, he reached into the leather satchel at his side and pulled out a bundle of dried herbs. White sage, exactly what Luna needed. This should be enough to counteract the silver, he said, offering it to me. Steep it in hot water and make her drink it every hour until the fever breaks. Our fingers brushed as I took the bundle, and electricity shot through me at the contact. His eyes widened slightly, telling me he'd felt it too, that impossible spark of recognition, of belonging. Thank you, I breathed, clutching the herbs to my chest like a lifeline. Don't thank me yet. His expression grew serious, almost pained. This changes nothing between our packs, Sera. Come tomorrow, we'll still be enemies. I know, but even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Everything had changed the moment our eyes met, the moment he'd chosen compassion over centuries of conditioning. This beautiful, dangerous man had just shattered every belief I'd held about Moonhaven wolves. You should go, he said, but he made no move to leave. Before someone finds us here. I nodded, but my feet seemed rooted to the forest floor. Part of me wanted to run back to Luna, to save her life with the gift he'd given me. But a larger part, the part that recognized something fundamental and terrifying in Kai's golden eyes, wanted to stay here forever, wrapped in the sweet agony of impossibility. Sera. My name was a warning on his lips. This can't happen again. I know, I said again, the words tasting like ash. But as I finally forced myself to step away, disappearing into the shadows between the trees, I could feel his eyes following me. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this wouldn't be the last time I saw Kai of the Moonhaven pack. Some hungers, once awakened, could never be satisfied. The blood moon watched us part, its crimson light a warning of the chaos to come. In the distance, a wolf howled, lonely, desperate, forbidden. It might have been him. It might have been me. Chapter 2. 3 days had passed since Luna's fever broke, and I still couldn't forget the way Kai's amber eyes had looked at me in the moonlight, like I was something precious instead of his sworn enemy. You're distracted. My father's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade as we stood in the Shadow Crest training grounds. Around us, pack members practiced combat forms, their grunts and snarls filling the morning air. I'm focused, I lied, adjusting my stance as I faced the training dummy. But when I struck, my punch landed off-center, lacking the brutal efficiency he'd drilled into me since childhood. Alpha Marcus Blackwood studied me with cold gray eyes that missed nothing. At 53, he was still a formidable force, his dark hair threaded with silver and his scarred hands testament to decades of pack leadership. Under his rule, Shadowcrest had grown strong through violence and fear, two things he valued above all else. The Moonhaven scum grows bolder, he said, circling me like a predator. 3 of our border patrols reported fresh scents near the northern perimeter. They're testing our defenses. My heart skipped, but I kept my expression neutral. What do you want to do about it? What I've always done. Show them the price of challenging Shadowcrest. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Tomorrow night, you'll lead a hunting party into their territory. It's time you proved yourself worthy of being my heir. The words hit me like a physical blow. A hunting party meant death. Innocent Moonhaven wolves would die to satisfy my father's bloodlust. And I would be expected to lead the slaughter, to stain my hands with the blood of Kai's packmates. Maybe even Kai himself. Father, No arguments, Serafina. My full name was a warning, delivered in the tone that had cowed lesser wolves into submission. You're 24 years old, and you've yet to make your first kill for the pack. The others whisper that you're weak, that you don't have what it takes to lead Shadowcrest when I'm gone. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. While other alpha heirs reveled in violence, I'd always found excuses to avoid the brutal raids that defined our pack's reputation. My father called it weakness. I called it having a conscience. I won't disappoint you, I said, the lie burning my throat. He nodded curtly. See that you don't. Dismissed. I fled the training grounds, my skin crawling with the need to shift and run until my lungs burned. Instead, I found myself walking the familiar paths that led to the neutral zone, drawn by a pull I couldn't name and didn't dare examine too closely. The sun was setting by the time I reached the ancient oak where Kai and I had first met. I told myself I was just checking the border, ensuring no Moonhaven wolves had crossed into our territory. But as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, I found myself scanning the shadows, searching for a glimpse of dark hair and amber eyes. He appeared like magic, stepping out from behind a massive pine, as if he'd been waiting for me. My breath caught at the sight of him. Leather jacket stretched across broad shoulders, jeans that hugged his powerful legs, and that same devastating smile that made my pulse race. "You came back," he said, and there was something almost vulnerable in his voice, as if my presence here meant more than it should. I shouldn't have. But even as I spoke, I was moving closer, drawn by the invisible thread that seemed to connect us. "This is dangerous, Kai. For both of us." "I know." He reached out, his fingertips grazing my cheek with devastating gentleness. "I've been trying to stay away. Spent the last 3 days running the mountain trails until my wolf collapsed from exhaustion, hoping to burn you out of my system." "Did it work?" His laugh was rough, pained. "What do you think?" The space between us disappeared as if by mutual agreement, our bodies gravitating toward each other like binary stars locked in an inevitable collision. This close, I could see the faint scar that bisected his left eyebrow, could count the flecks of gold in his irises. "Tell me about your sister," he said softly. "Is she better?" The fact that he remembered, that he cared enough to ask, made my chest tight with emotion. "She's healing. The herbs you gave me saved her life." "Good." His hand was still on my face, thumb tracing the curve of my cheekbone. "I'm glad. Why did you help me that night? You could have killed me, or taken me prisoner. Your pack would have celebrated either choice." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a sister willing to risk everything to save someone she loved. I saw you." The sincerity in his voice broke something open in my chest. Before I could think, before I could remember all the reasons this was impossible, I rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was electric, sending shockwaves through every nerve ending. Kai groaned against my mouth, his arms coming around me to pull me closer as I melted into the solid warmth of his chest. He tasted like mint and danger, like everything I'd been denied my whole life. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "This is insane," he whispered. "I know." I could barely form words past the thundering of my heart. "If my pack finds out, they'll exile me. If yours discovers this, my father would kill you," I finished, the truth like ice water in my veins. "Then he'd probably lock me away until I agreed to mate with someone he chose. We should have pulled apart then, should have walked away and never looked back. Instead, Kai's hands tangled in my hair, and I found myself leaning into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. "There's something you need to know," I said, the words heavy with dread. "My father, he's planning a raid tomorrow night. A hunting party into Moonhaven territory." Kai went rigid, his amber eyes flashing with sudden alarm. "How many wolves?" 12. Maybe more." I gripped his jacket, desperate to make him understand. "You have to warn your pack. Get them to safety." "And you?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Will you be leading this hunting party?" The question hung between us like a blade. I wanted to lie, to tell him I'd find a way out of it, but the truth was written in my silence.
Sera.
My name was a plea, a prayer, a condemnation all at once. "I don't have a choice," I whispered. "If I refuse, he'll know something's wrong. He'll start asking questions I can't answer." Kai's hands dropped from my face, as if I'd burned him. The hurt in his eyes was worse than any physical blow my father had ever landed. "So you'll come into my territory tomorrow night, and you'll try to kill my packmates. Maybe me. I'll find a way to warn them without." "Without what? Without getting blood on your hands? Without proving to Daddy that you're the ruthless killer he wants you to be?" The bitterness in his voice cut deep, but I couldn't blame him for it. It's not like that. Isn't it? He stepped back, putting distance between us that felt like an ocean. Tell me, princess, when you're standing over the body of someone I've known since childhood, someone with a mate and cubs waiting at home, will you think of this moment? Will you remember how my mouth felt against yours? Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them back. That's not fair. None of this is fair. The words exploded from him, raw with pain and fury. You think I don't know what you're going through? My father would gut me if he knew I was here, talking to you instead of planning your pack's destruction. Every moment I spend with you is a betrayal of everything I was raised to believe. Then why are you here? The question seemed to deflate his anger, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. Because I can't stay away. Because for the first time in my life, I've found something worth fighting for, and it's the one thing I can never have. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with longing and impossibility. I wanted to go to him, to close the distance he'd created and lose myself in his arms. Instead, I forced myself to take another step back. I should go. Yeah, he agreed, but neither of us moved. A wolf howled in the distance, a Moonhaven scout, most likely calling the patrol home. The sound seemed to break whatever spell held us frozen, and Kai finally turned away. Be careful tomorrow night, I called after him, my voice cracking with unshed tears. He paused at the edge of the clearing, his shoulders tense beneath his leather jacket. You too, Sera. And remember, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you have to do to survive, it doesn't change what's between us. Then he was gone, melting into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. I stood alone in the growing darkness, my lips still tingling from his kiss and my heart shattering with the knowledge that tomorrow night I might be the one to destroy the only good thing I'd ever found. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled across the mountains. A storm was coming, and I was caught directly in its path. Chapter 3. The hunting party gathered at midnight, 12 of Shadowcrest's most vicious wolves armed with silver-tipped claws and hearts full of hatred. I stood before them in the moonlight, my father's expectations weighing heavy on my shoulders as I tried to project the ruthless confidence of a born killer. Tonight, we remind Moonhaven of their place, I announced, my voice carrying across the assembled pack. We strike fast, we strike hard, and we leave no witnesses. A chorus of savage howls greeted my words, bloodlust gleaming in yellow eyes. These wolves lived for moments like this, the chance to spill enemy blood and prove their dominance. Among them stood my father's most trusted enforcers, Razor, whose scarred muzzle bore testament to a dozen victories, Vex, who collected the teeth of his kills, and Thorn, my father's beta, whose cold smile promised that he was watching my every move. Remember, Thorn said, his voice a gravelly whisper, Alpha Marcus expects results. No more of the gentle raids that accomplish nothing. Tonight, we paint the forest red. My stomach churned, but I nodded grimly. Follow me. We shifted as one, human forms melting into wolves of shadow and steel. My wolf was larger than most, her coat the deep black of midnight with silver markings that marked me as Alphaborn. But as we loped through the darkness toward Moonhaven territory, I felt like the worst kind of fraud. The plan was simple and brutal. Strike the outer settlements first, working our way toward the pack center until Moonhaven was forced to submit or face extinction. My father had chosen tonight specifically because their alpha, Kai's father, was away meeting with the Council of Pack Leaders, leaving them vulnerable. As we crossed the border into enemy territory, my wolf senses went into overdrive. Every scent told a story. The musky sweetness of wolf cubs playing, the warm comfort of mated pairs, the everyday life of a pack that had no idea death was stalking them through the trees. Turn back, my conscience screamed. Find another way. But Thorn was right behind me, his silver eyes boring into my spine, ready to report any sign of weakness to my father. And scattered through the hunting party were wolves who'd known me since childhood, who'd trained beside me, who trusted me to lead them to victory. The first settlement appeared through the trees, 3 modest cabins clustered around a central fire pit, smoke curling peacefully from their chimneys. Warm light spilled from windows, and I could hear the faint sound of laughter from within. I held up a paw, signaling the pack to stop. This was it, the moment that would define who I really was. My father's daughter, or something else entirely. Something else, I decided. Instead of the silent attack signal, I threw back my head and howled, long, loud, and unmistakably territorial. It was a challenge call, one that would wake every wolf for miles and send them scrambling for safety. The hunting party froze in shock. Razor's eyes went wide with disbelief, while Thorn's lips pulled back in a snarl of fury. But it was too late. My warning cry was already echoing through the forest, answered by frantic howls from the settlement as Moonhaven wolves realized they were under attack. "What have you done?" Thorn snarled, his mental voice cutting through our pack link with vicious fury. "What I had to," I replied, standing my ground as chaos erupted around us. The settlement wolves burst from their homes in a rush of claws and fangs, but instead of the easy slaughter my father had planned, they found a prepared enemy. More howls rose in the distance as reinforcements raced toward us through the night. "You've betrayed us." Razor lunged for my throat, silver claws extended, but I was ready for him. We collided in a tangle of fur and fury, rolling across the forest floor as the rest of the hunting party scattered into individual battles. Razor was a veteran fighter, but rage made him sloppy. I used his momentum against him, twisting away from his snapping jaws and raking my claws across his ribs. He yelped in pain and surprise. I'd never fought with such lethal intent before. "You're a traitor," he gasped, blood matting his gray fur. "I'm choosing love over hate," I replied, dodging another swipe of his claws. "Something you'll never understand." The battle raged around us, but it wasn't the massacre my father had envisioned. Thanks to my warning, the Moonhaven wolves were ready, and more arrived with each passing moment. What should have been a quick strike had turned into a prolonged conflict with no clear victor. Through the chaos, I caught glimpses of familiar golden fur, Kai, fighting with desperate skill against 2 shadow-crest wolves at once. My heart clenched as I watched him take a vicious swipe across his shoulder, crimson staining his beautiful coat. I had to get to him. Abandoning my fight with Razor, I bounded across the clearing, using every trick my father had ever taught me to weave between battling wolves. A Moonhaven wolf I didn't recognize tried to intercept me, but I called out in the ancient pack tongue, "Friend." "I'm friend." The wolf hesitated just long enough for me to pass, though I could feel his confusion and suspicion burning into my back. I didn't blame him. To him, I was just another Shadowcrest killer. Kai was backed against a massive pine, blood loss making him slower than usual as the 2 wolves circled him like vultures. I recognized them both. Vex and Claw, 2 of my father's most sadistic enforcers. "Not happening," I thought grimly. I hit Vex from the side, my full weight slamming him into the ground with bone-crushing force. He rolled, snapping at my legs, but I was already moving, positioning myself between the 2 Shadowcrest wolves and Kai. Well, Claw sneered, his mental voice dripping with malicious amusement. "The little princess finally shows her true colors. Daddy's going to be so disappointed." "Tell him I said he can go to hell," I replied, baring my fangs. What followed was the fight of my life. Vex and Claw were seasoned killers who'd been honing their skills since I was in diapers, and they weren't holding back just because I was the alpha's daughter. They came at me from both sides, claws and teeth seeking any opening, any moment of weakness. Behind me, I could hear Kai's ragged breathing, could smell the copper sweetness of his blood. The knowledge that he was hurt, that these monsters had wounded him, filled me with a rage I'd never experienced before. My wolf surged forward with predatory grace, no longer the reluctant fighter my father had despaired of. This was what I'd been born for, not senseless killing, but protecting the innocent, protecting the one I loved. I caught Vex across the muzzle with my claws, opening a gash that sent blood spattering across the pine needles. He howled in pain and fury, but before he could retaliate, Claw was on my back, his weight driving me to the ground. His jaws snapped toward my throat, but Kai was suddenly there, golden fur blazing in the moonlight as he tackled the larger wolf away from me. They rolled in a snarling ball of violence, and I saw with horror that Kai's earlier wounds had reopened, painting his side crimson. No! I threw myself back into the fight, my claws finding Claw's ribs as Kai held him down. The wolf's scream of agony cut through the night, but I felt no satisfaction in his pain, only desperate relief that Kai was safe. Around us, the battle was winding down. The surprise attack had failed, and several of the Shadow-Crest wolves were retreating into the darkness, carrying their wounded with them. But I knew this victory came with a price. My betrayal would not go unnoticed or unpunished. "You saved my pack," Kai said as we shifted back to human form, his voice rough with pain and something deeper. Blood from his shoulder wound painted his chest in stark red lines, but his amber eyes were bright with life. "I saved you," I replied, reaching out to touch his face with trembling fingers. "I couldn't let them hurt you. Sera." My name was a prayer on his lips as he pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me despite the chaos still swirling around us. "Do you know what you've done? There's no going back from this." I buried my face against his throat, breathing in his scent, cedar and storms and the metallic tang of blood. "I know. My father will never forgive this. Neither will the pack." "Then come with me." The words tumbled out of him in a rush, desperate and pleading. "Leave Shadowcrest. Join Moonhaven. My father isn't perfect, but he's not a monster. He'll understand." "Sera?" The roar cut through the night like a blade, freezing my blood in my veins. I knew that voice, had been conditioned to obey it since birth. My father stood at the edge of the clearing, still in human form, his gray eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. Behind him stood a dozen more Shadowcrest wolves, including some of the pack's most senior members. They'd come to investigate when the hunting party failed to return on schedule. "Step away from that animal," Alpha Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority.
Now.
Kai's arms tightened around me protectively, but I could feel the terror radiating from him. Facing my father in battle was a death sentence, and we both knew it. "I won't ask again, daughter." The word was spat like a curse. "Come here. Immediately." I looked up at Kai one last time, memorizing the golden flecks in his amber eyes, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. "I have to go," I whispered. "Don't." His voice cracked with desperation. "Please, Sera. We can fight them together." But even as he spoke, more Moonhaven wolves were emerging from the forest, their eyes flicking nervously between the two opposing forces. This was their territory, but my father had brought enough wolves to turn the clearing into a bloodbath.
Too many innocents would die.
"I love you," I breathed against his ear, the words barely audible. Then, before he could respond, I pulled away and walked toward my father. Each step felt like dying. Alpha Marcus watched me approach with cold calculation, his scarred hands clenched into fists. When I was close enough, he struck, his open palm across my face with enough force to send me staggering. "Traitor," he hissed. "You've brought shame on our entire bloodline." I tasted blood where my teeth had cut my lip, but I didn't flinch. "I prevented a massacre. You prevented justice." His eyes burned with fanatical hatred. "But don't worry, daughter. I'll finish what you started. After I deal with your punishment, I'll return here and burn this place to the ground, starting with your lover." Behind me, Kai growled low and dangerous, but he was outnumbered 10-1. Any move he made would only get him killed faster. "Please," I whispered, all pretense of strength crumbling. "Punish me, exile me, do whatever you want, but leave them alone." My father's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Oh, I intend to punish you, Serafina, in ways that will make you wish I'd simply killed you tonight." As his wolves closed in around me, I caught one last glimpse of Kai across the clearing. The pain in his amber eyes was worse than any physical torture my father could devise. "This isn't over," I called out, my voice carrying across the distance between us. "I'll find a way back to you. I swear it." But even as I spoke the words, I felt the silver chains of my father's authority closing around me, dragging me back into the darkness I'd tried so hard to escape. The last thing I heard before we disappeared into the forest was Kai howling, a sound of such raw anguish that it shattered what remained of my heart. Chapter 4. The silver chains burned my wrists like acid, but the pain was nothing compared to the agony in my chest. 3 days had passed since my father dragged me away from Kai. 3 days. Locked in the punishment cells beneath Shadowcrest's main compound, and still I could hear the echo of his anguished howl.
Eat.
Thorn shoved a bowl of gruel through the bars, his silver eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "Alpha's orders. Can't have you dying before your mating ceremony." My blood turned to ice. "What mating ceremony?" His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Did you think there wouldn't be consequences for your betrayal? Alpha Marcus has arranged a union that will restore honor to the Blackwood name. You're to be mated to Victor Ironclad of the Blood Moon Pack." Victor Ironclad. I'd heard the name whispered in the same breath as words like brutal and savage. The Blood Moon Pack was legendary for their cruelty, their territory built on the bones of conquered enemies. Their alpha was said to collect the hearts of his defeated foes.
No.
The word came out as barely a whisper.
He can't.
"I'm his daughter." "You are his daughter," Thorn corrected with vicious glee. "Now you're just a political asset to be traded for an alliance. Victor arrives tomorrow night for the ceremony. I suggest you prepare yourself to be a proper mate." He left me alone with that poisonous knowledge, the silver chains growing heavier with each passing hour. Outside my cell, I could hear the sounds of preparation, servants scurrying through the corridors, my father barking orders, the steady ring of hammers as they constructed something in the great hall. A wedding altar, most likely. Or perhaps an execution platform. At this point, I wasn't sure there was much difference. The hours crawled by until a soft scraping at the window made me look up. Luna's pale face appeared in the narrow opening, her blue eyes wide with fear and determination. "Sera," she whispered, her small hands working at the iron bars. "Are you hurt? Father's guards won't let anyone near the cells." "Luna, what are you doing here?" I struggled to my feet, the chains clanking with every movement. "If Father finds you, he won't. Everyone's too busy preparing for tomorrow." She couldn't bring herself to say the word wedding, and I didn't blame her. "Sera, you can't marry Victor Ironclad. The stories about him, the things he's done to his enemies." "I know." I pressed my face against the bars, as close to my sister as the silver would allow. "But I don't have a choice. Father's made sure of that. There has to be something, some way to escape." Luna's voice cracked with desperation. "What about the Moonhaven Wolf? The one who saved my life? Couldn't he?"
No.
The word came out harsher than I intended, but the thought of Kai walking into this trap made my blood run cold. "Promise me, Luna. Whatever happens, you won't contact him. Father's hoping he'll try to rescue me. It would give him an excuse to start the war he's always wanted." My sister's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded reluctantly. "There has to be another way." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Luna's face went white with terror. "Go," I urged. "Now, before they catch you." She disappeared into the night just as the cell door clanged open. My father stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards, his expression colder than winter stone. "Bring her," he commanded. The guards hauled me to my feet, the silver chains burning fresh welts into my skin. They dragged me through corridors I'd known since childhood, past rooms where I'd played as a pup, until we reached the Great Hall. What I saw there stole the breath from my lungs. The hall had been transformed into a grotesque parody of celebration. Black banners hung from the rafters, emblazoned with the blood-red wolf of the Blood Moon Pack. Candles flickered in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. And at the far end, on a raised platform, stood an altar carved from what looked suspiciously like human bone. But it was the man standing beside the altar who truly terrified me. Victor Ironclad was a giant even by werewolf standards, his massive frame draped in a coat made from the pelts of his enemies. Gray streaked his black hair, and scars crisscrossed his face like a roadmap of violence. When he smiled at my entrance, I caught the glint of gold teeth, canines filed to savage points. "So this is the famous Sera Blackwood," he rumbled, his voice like gravel in a landslide. "The Alpha's daughter who betrayed her own pack for enemy cock." Heat flooded my cheeks, but I kept my chin raised. "I have nothing to say to you." His laughter boomed through the hall. "Spirit. I like that in a mate. It makes the breaking so much more satisfying. You will show respect to your future alpha." My father growled, but I caught something in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty, as if he was beginning to realize what he'd unleashed. "Oh, I'll show her all sorts of things," Victor said, his pale eyes traveling over my body with predatory hunger. "Once we're properly mated, I'll teach her the proper way to serve the Blood Moon pack. Starting with the hunt scheduled for next week." "What hunt?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Moonhaven, of course." His smile widened, revealing more of those horrific golden fangs. "Our mating alliance calls for a joint raid to eliminate the pack that corrupted you. I thought you might enjoy watching your former lover die slowly." The world tilted around me. This wasn't just about punishing my betrayal. My father was using my forced marriage to justify genocide. Hundreds of innocent wolves would die, including Kai, all because I dared to love across enemy lines. "You monster," I breathed. Victor's hand shot out faster than thought, his massive fingers wrapping around my throat. "You'll learn respect, little wolf. One way or another." "Enough." My father's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "She's still my daughter until the ceremony is complete. After that, she's yours to discipline as you see fit." The giant alpha released me with obvious reluctance, but his pale eyes promised that tomorrow night would bring a reckoning. I rubbed my throat, feeling the bruises already forming. "The ceremony will begin at midnight," my father announced. "Until then, the bride will remain in her cell to contemplate her new duties." As the guards dragged me away, I caught a glimpse of Luna watching from the shadows, her young face streaked with tears. The sight of her anguish cut deeper than any physical pain Victor could inflict. Back in my cell, I collapsed onto the straw mattress, my mind racing despite my exhaustion. Less than 24 hours remained before I became Victor's mate, before he used our alliance to launch the war that would destroy everything I held dear. I had to escape. Had to warn Kai and his pack about the coming storm. But the silver chains made shifting impossible, and the guards had tripled since my father's announcement. Even if I could break free, where would I go? Victor's wolves were already patrolling the borders, cutting off any escape route. As if summoned by my despair, a new voice echoed through the narrow window.
"Sera."
The whisper was barely audible, but I'd know that voice anywhere.
"Kai."
I struggled to the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What are you doing here?" "It's a trap." His face appeared in the opening, amber eyes blazing with desperate determination. "I'm getting you out of here." "No, you don't understand. My father wants you to come. He's arranged for me to marry Victor Ironclad tomorrow night, and they're planning to use the alliance to attack your pack. You have to warn them, get them to safety. I'm not leaving without you." His fingers worked at the iron bars, testing their strength. "My pack is already evacuating the settlements, moving deeper into the mountains. But I won't abandon you to that monster. Kai, please." Tears I'd been holding back for days finally spilled down my cheeks. "If they catch you here, they'll kill you.
Slowly.
And then they'll still attack your pack. Then we'll die together." His voice was fierce with conviction. "I'd rather spend one day with you than a lifetime without you." Before I could argue, the sound of approaching footsteps made us both freeze. Kai melted back into the shadows just as Thorn appeared in the corridor, flanked by 3 guards. "Thought I heard voices," he mused, his silver eyes scanning the cell suspiciously. "Talking to yourself, princess? Already going mad at the thought of your wedding night?" I forced myself to meet his gaze steadily. "Just praying for the strength to survive tomorrow." "You'll need it." His smile was sharp with malice. Victor's previous mates didn't last long. Something about his appetites. But I'm sure you'll prove more durable. He left with his guards, but I knew they'd be watching more closely now. I pressed my face to the window, whispering urgently into the darkness. Kai, are you still there? Silence. He was gone, melted back into the night like the phantom he'd have to become to survive. Part of me was relieved. At least he was safe, for now. But the larger part of my heart felt like it was being torn from my chest. Tomorrow night, I would become Victor Ironclad's mate. Tomorrow night, the last hope for peace between our packs would die in blood and fire. And somewhere in the mountains, the only man I'd ever loved would be running for his life, carrying the knowledge that I was lost to him forever. Unless an idea began to form in the depths of my despair, dangerous and desperate, but perhaps the only chance we had left. If I could find a way to turn Victor's brutality against him, if I could make him reveal his true nature in front of witnesses. The silver chain seemed lighter as I began to plan. Tomorrow night would indeed bring a reckoning, but maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be the one my father expected. Outside my window, a wolf howled in the distance. Not Kai, the voice was wrong, but perhaps a message, a promise that I wasn't as alone as I felt. The blood moon was rising again, painting the world in shades of crimson. And in its light, impossible things sometimes became possible.
Chapter 5.
The wedding dress was a masterpiece of mockery, white silk that might as well have been a funeral shroud, silver embroidery that burned my skin where it touched, and a veil that felt more like a spider's web designed to trap its prey. 2 blood moon she-wolves had been assigned to prepare me, their rough hands and cruel smiles making it clear this was more punishment than privilege. Hold still, snarled the larger one, yanking my hair so hard I saw stars. Alpha Victor likes his mates properly presented. Though not for long, added her companion with a vicious laugh. His last mate barely lasted a month before she threw herself from the cliffs. Couldn't handle his particular preferences. They were trying to break me, to reduce me to a trembling victim before the ceremony began. Instead, their words only strengthened my resolve. Victor Ironclad might have broken other women, but I was a Blackwood alpha, and tonight, he was going to learn exactly what that meant. The Great Hall had been transformed once again, filled with wolves from both packs. Shadow Crest members sat on one side, their faces a mixture of satisfaction and unease, while Blood Moon wolves occupied the other, their eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. At the front, Victor waited beside the bone altar, resplendent in a black coat made from the pelts of his enemies. But it was the figure standing in the shadows near the back that made my breath catch.
Kai.
Somehow, impossibly, he'd infiltrated the ceremony. His dark hair was hidden beneath a hood, his familiar frame disguised by borrowed blood moon leathers, but I'd know those amber eyes anywhere. What are you doing? I wanted to scream. This is madness. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up, and the pain in his expression nearly brought me to my knees. He mouthed a single word. Trust me. Dearly beloved, my father began, his voice echoing through the hall. We gather tonight to witness the union of 2 great bloodlines. The words washed over me like poison as I was marched down the aisle, every step taking me closer to a fate worse than death. Victor's pale eyes traveled over my body with possessive hunger, his gold-capped fangs glinting in the candlelight. When I reached the altar, he grabbed my hand with bruising force, his voice a rumble of dark promise. Soon, little wolf. Soon you'll learn what it means to serve a true alpha. The ceremony proceeded with agonizing slowness, each ritual binding us closer together in the eyes of pack law. Ancient words were spoken. Blood was mingled, and still I waited for my moment, the opening I needed to expose Victor for the monster he truly was. It came when Elder Grimm asked for the traditional vows. Do you, Victor Ironclad, promise to protect and cherish your mate according to the ancient laws? Victor's smile was sharp as a blade. I promise to possess her completely, to break her will and remake her in my image. She will serve my pleasure and bear my spawn, and when she outlives her usefulness. He shrugged eloquently. Well, Accidents happen to disobedient mates. Gasps rippled through the assembled wolves. Even for a forced mating, such words were beyond the pale, a public admission of intended abuse. But my father remained silent, his jaw clenched with the effort of maintaining the alliance. Elder Grimm's ancient face creased with disturbance. Alpha Victor, perhaps you misspoke. I spoke exactly as I meant to. Victor's grip on my hand tightened until I felt bones grind together. This little bitch betrayed her own pack for enemy cock. She deserves nothing less than total subjugation. More murmurs arose from the crowd, but it was the sound from the back of the hall that made my heart soar, a low, rumbling growl that could only come from one throat. Kai stepped forward, throwing back his hood to reveal his true identity. I challenged that claim. The hall erupted in chaos. Shadow-crest wolves leaped to their feet, weapons appearing in their hands, while Blood Moon warriors snarled and began to shift. But my father's voice cut through the din like a whip crack. Silence. He turned to stare at Kai, with eyes like winter storms. You dare show your face here, Moonhaven scum? I invoke the ancient right of challenge, Kai replied, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet. This male has publicly declared his intention to abuse and possibly murder his mate. By pack law, I have the right to contest for her freedom. You have no standing here, Victor snarled, his massive frame beginning to ripple with the beginnings of a shift. She is mine by right of alliance. Is she? Kai's amber eyes blazed with righteous fury. Because it sounds to me like you just admitted to planning her torture and death. Tell me, Alpha Marcus, is that the kind of mate you want for your daughter? A monster who brags about killing his previous wives. My father's face went through a series of complicated expressions, rage, calculation, and something that might have been shame. The alliance with Blood Moon was important, but publicly condoning the murder of his own daughter was a step too far, even for him. The challenge is acknowledged, he said finally, each word dragged from him like pulling teeth. Victor Ironclad of Blood Moon versus Kai Stormridge of Moonhaven. The winner claims the female. No. I broke free from the guards holding me, my voice ringing through the hall. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm a person with the right to choose. But even as I spoke, I felt the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on me. Pack law was clear. In a mate challenge, the victor claimed the spoils. My only hope was that Kai could defeat a wolf twice his size and 3 times as vicious. The two males began to circle each other, their eyes locked in primal challenge. Victor was larger, older, more experienced in combat. But Kai moved with the fluid grace of a natural fighter, and his eyes burned with the fire of a wolf protecting his mate. You should have stayed hidden in your mountains, pup, Victor taunted, beginning his shift. Now I'll tear out your throat and make your precious bitch watch. Try it, Kai replied, his own transformation beginning. The shift was always beautiful to watch, human form melting into wolf with liquid grace. But when Victor completed his change, gasps of horror arose from the crowd. The beast that stood where the Blood Moon Alpha had been was a monstrosity, larger than any natural wolf, his coat patchy with scars, his muzzle elongated into something almost reptilian. Kai's wolf was smaller but perfect in its symmetry, golden for gleaming in the candlelight, amber eyes bright with intelligence and determination. When the two beasts faced each other, it looked like David preparing to face Goliath. Victor struck first, his massive jaws snapping toward Kai's throat. But the younger wolf was ready, dancing away from the attack and scoring a hit across his opponent's ribs. First blood to Kai, though the wound was shallow. The battle raged across the great hall, furniture splintering as the two wolves crashed through it. Victor fought like the monster he was, all brute force and savage fury. Kai fought like an artist, using speed and intelligence to stay ahead of those crushing jaws. But even art has its limits when faced with overwhelming power. Victor's claws caught Kai across the shoulder, sending him tumbling into the wall with a sickening crack. The golden wolf struggled to his feet, blood matting his beautiful coat, and I saw the exhaustion beginning to take its toll. Finish him. Victor's mental voice roared through the pack link. Show them what happens to those who challenge the Blood Moon. He lunged for Kai's throat, jaws wide, victory within his grasp. But I couldn't just stand there and watch the love of my life die. Without thinking, I threw myself between them, silver dress and all. Victor's jaws snapped shut inches from my face, his pale eyes wide with shock. In that moment of hesitation, Kai struck, his fangs finding the soft spot beneath Victor's jaw, his claws raking across the larger wolf's exposed belly. Victor's howl of pain and rage shook the rafters, but it was cut short as Kai's jaws found his throat. The Blood Moon Alpha thrashed desperately, but the younger wolf held on with grim determination, applying pressure until Victor's struggles grew weaker, then stopped altogether. Silence fell over the great hall like a burial shroud. Kai released his hold and stepped back, his golden coat painted crimson but his amber eyes bright with victory. Victor, ironclad, lay motionless on the stone floor, his reign of terror finally ended. "The challenge is complete," Elder Grimm announced, his ancient voice shaking with emotion. "Kai Stormridge of Moonhaven has won the right to claim Sera Blackwood as his mate." But even as the words left his lips, I saw the trap closing around us. My father's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction, and I realized with dawning horror that this had all been part of his plan. "Indeed he has," my father said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "And by ancient law, the victor must claim his prize immediately, here, before witnesses, to seal the bond. The forced mating. Of course. If Kai claimed me publicly, he'd be bound to me by laws even older than pack rivalry. But it also meant he'd be trapped here, unable to return to warn his people about the coming attack. Unless, of course," my father continued with false benevolence, "the Moonhaven wolf would prefer to reject his prize and return home empty-handed?" Kai looked at me, and I saw the impossible choice reflected in his amber eyes. Claim me and be trapped, abandoning his pack to their fate. Or walk away and leave me to whatever punishment my father devised. "I claim her," he said without hesitation, his voice ringing through the hall like a bell. "Sera Blackwood is my mate, now and forever." The words should have filled me with joy. Instead, all I could think about was the smile spreading across my father's scarred face, the expression of a man whose trap had just snapped shut around his prey. We'd won the battle, but I had the terrible feeling we'd just lost the war. Chapter 6. The mating chamber was a gilded cage, silk sheets that felt like chains, rose petals that smelled like funeral flowers, and silver bars on the windows that made escape impossible. They'd given us an hour alone to complete the bond, but I knew guards stood just outside the door, waiting for any excuse to burst in and drag Kai away in chains. "This was a mistake," I whispered, pressing my forehead against his chest as he held me. His heart hammered beneath my ear, strong and steady despite the impossible situation we found ourselves in. "You should have let me marry Victor. At least then your pack would be safe." "Never." His arms tightened around me, and I could feel the tremor of suppressed rage in his muscles. "I'd burn the world down before I let that monster touch you. But now you're trapped here, and my father—" My voice broke as the full scope of the trap became clear. "He planned this, Kai. He wanted you to come, wanted you to challenge Victor. He knew you'd win." "Why?" But even as he asked, I could see understanding dawning in his amber eyes. "Because now he has leverage over both our packs. He's holding you hostage to ensure Moonhaven's compliance, and he's got me bound to you to keep me in line." I pulled back to look at his beautiful face, memorizing every detail in case this was our last moment together. "Tomorrow he'll send word to your father, surrender unconditionally, or watch his heir die slowly." Kai's jaw clenched with frustrated fury. "My father won't surrender. He'll try to rescue me instead, and that's exactly what your father wants." An excuse to claim Moonhaven attacked first. A soft knock at the door made us both freeze. "Time's up," Thorn called from the hallway, his voice thick with malicious amusement. "The Alpha wants to see you both.
Now."
We found my father in his study, surrounded by maps and battle plans. The sight of them made my blood run cold. Detailed layouts of Moonhaven territory, patrol schedules, weak points in their defenses. He'd been planning this war for months, maybe years. The happy couple. He didn't look up from his papers as we entered. I trust you've had time to appreciate your new circumstances? What do you want? Kai demanded, his voice tight with controlled rage. Straight to the point. I like that. My father finally raised his eyes, and the satisfaction in them made my skin crawl. It's simple, really. You're going to help me destroy your pack. Like hell I am. Oh, but you are. My father's smile was sharp as winter ice. Because if you don't, I'll start sending pieces of your mate back to Moonhaven. Starting with her fingers, then her toes, working my way up to more essential parts. I felt Kai go rigid beside me, his sense spiking with protective fury. You sick bastard. She's your own daughter. She's a traitor who chose enemy cock over family loyalty. The casual cruelty in my father's voice made me flinch. But she still has her uses, as does her mate's intimate knowledge of Moonhaven's defenses. I'll never. You will. My father pulled out a silver blade, its edge gleaming in the firelight. Unless you'd prefer I start the demonstration now. Before either of us could react, he crossed the room and pressed the blade to my throat. The silver burned like acid, and I couldn't stop the whimper of pain that escaped my lips. Stop. Kai's voice cracked with desperation. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt her. Much better. My father lowered the blade, but didn't step away. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you'll send a message to your father claiming you've decided to remain with your new mate voluntarily. You'll tell him the alliance between our packs is still possible if he agrees to a meeting to discuss terms. He'll never believe that. He will when you include details only you would know. Family secrets, childhood memories, proof that the message really comes from you. My father's smile grew wider. And when he comes to rescue you, because we both know he will, my wolves will be waiting. The trap was diabolical in its simplicity. Alpha Garrett Stormridge would never abandon his son, especially not to the pack that had been their enemies for generations. He'd come with a rescue party, walking straight into an ambush that would decimate Moonhaven's leadership. You're a monster, I breathed. I'm a pragmatist. My father sheathed the silver blade with casual precision. Moonhaven has resources I need: territory, hunting grounds, strategic position. Marriage alliances are for weaklings who can't take what they want by force. And if I refuse to cooperate? Kai asked, though we all knew the answer. My father's hand moved faster than thought, the blade reappearing to trace a line across my cheek. I felt the burn of silver and the warm trickle of blood, but I bit back my scream. There's your answer, my father said softly. I can keep this up for hours. Days, even. The question is, how much of your mate are you willing to watch me carve away? Kai's face went white with helpless rage. You bastard. If you hurt her. You'll what? You're chained with silver, surrounded by my wolves, and completely at my mercy. My father wiped the blade clean with deliberate care. The only power you have left is the power to choose how this ends. Cooperate, and she lives. Refuse, and she dies by inches. I could see Kai breaking, his protective instincts warring with his loyalty to his pack. But I couldn't let him sacrifice everything for me. Don't do it, I said, ignoring the fresh burn of silver across my cheek. Let him kill me. Don't give him your pack. Sera, no. I mean it. I turned to face him fully, letting him see the determination in my eyes. I'd rather die free than live knowing I was the weapon he used to destroy everything you love. For a moment, the love in his amber eyes was so intense it took my breath away. Then his expression hardened with resolve. I'll write the letter, he said quietly. Kai, don't. But, he continued, cutting off my protest, I want something in return. My father raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, aren't I? You need that letter to be convincing, which means you need me alive and unbroken. That gives me some leverage. Kai stepped forward, putting himself between me and my father. I want your word that Sera won't be harmed as long as I cooperate. My word. My father laughed, but there was something calculating in his expression. What makes you think my word is worth anything? Because you're not completely without honor, despite appearances. You loved my mate once, before your hatred consumed you. Some part of you must still remember what it was like to have a daughter instead of a political asset. Something flickered in my father's eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it.
Fine, he said at last.
As long as you cooperate fully, she remains unharmed. But any attempt at treachery, any hint of deception, and she pays the price. Agreed. Kai's voice was steady, but I could see the cost of the decision in the tension of his shoulders. I'll need writing materials and privacy to compose the message. You'll have both. Tomorrow. My father moved to the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. Don't think this newfound cooperation will spare your pack. I'll honor my word about Sera, but Moonhaven will still burn. The only difference is whether she watches from the ashes or joins them. The door slammed behind him, leaving us alone with the weight of impossible choices. Kai immediately pulled me into his arms, his hands gentle as they examined the silver burn on my cheek. I'm sorry, he whispered.
I'm so sorry, Sera.
There has to be another way. There isn't. I pressed my face against his throat, breathing in his scent of cedar and storms. And even if there was, I wouldn't change anything. These past few days, loving you, being loved by you, it's been worth everything. Don't talk like this is over. His voice was fierce with determination. I'm not giving up. There has to be something we can do. But even as he spoke, I could hear the desperation beneath his words. We were trapped in my father's web, and every move we made only pulled the strands tighter. Tomorrow, Kai would write the letter that would doom his pack. And there was nothing either of us could do to stop it. Outside the study windows, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain and wind and chaos. But even the fury of nature seemed pale compared to the storm brewing in my father's black heart. I closed my eyes and tried to memorize this moment, Kai's arms around me, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my cheek, the faint scent of cedar that clung to his skin. Tomorrow would bring betrayal and bloodshed, but tonight we still had each other. It would have to be enough. Chapter 7. Dawn brought no mercy, only the sound of my father's boots echoing through the corridor like a death march. Kai and I had spent the night holding each other in the narrow bed, neither of us sleeping, both knowing that today would seal the fate of everyone we loved. Time to write history, Moonhaven, my father announced as he entered our cell, flanked by 6 guards. I trust you've had time to think about what you want to say to Daddy? Kai's jaw clenched, but he nodded slowly. I'll need paper. And ink. Already prepared. My father gestured, and one of the guards stepped forward with an ornate writing desk, the kind used for official pack correspondence. But you won't be writing alone. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? I mean our lovely bride will be sitting right beside you, where I can see her. He drew the silver blade again, its edge gleaming with promise. Every word, every phrase, every punctuation mark, it all depends on how much pain she can endure. They chained us both to chairs at the writing desk, silver burning my wrists as Kai was forced to take up the quill. My father positioned himself directly behind me, the blade resting against the pulse point in my throat. Begin with something personal, he instructed. Something only you would know. Kai's hand trembled as he touched quill to paper. Father, he began, his voice cracking with emotion as he spoke each word aloud. Do you remember the summer I turned 12, when you taught me to track deer in the northern valleys? You said a true alpha protects not just with strength, but with wisdom. The blade pressed deeper into my throat as my father leaned forward. Good. Now tell him about your decision to stay. I've made a choice that will shock you. Kai's eyes met mine across the desk, pain and apology written in their amber depths. I've decided to remain with Shadowcrest, not as a prisoner, but as the mate of Sera Blackwood. Each word was a knife in my heart. The letter was perfectly crafted, personal enough to convince Alpha Garrett it came from his son, emotional enough to explain such a shocking decision. Mention the alliance, my father prompted, and I felt a thin line of blood trickle down my throat where the blade had cut. I know this seems impossible, but I believe there's a chance for peace between our packs. Alpha Marcus has agreed to discuss terms for ending our generations of conflict. The meeting place will be the stone circle at moonrise tomorrow, neutral ground, as tradition demands. The stone circle, ancient meeting place of the packs, surrounded by standing stones older than memory. Also the perfect location for an ambush, with multiple escape routes for the attackers and none for the victims. Add something about trust, my father commanded. Make it convincing. Kai's hand shook as he continued writing. I know you're angry, disappointed, afraid for me. But I've found something here worth fighting for. Not just love, but the possibility of a future where our children don't grow up hating each other for crimes committed before they were born. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to him write our people's death warrant in words that could have been beautiful if they weren't lies. The worst part was that some of it was true. Kai did believe in the possibility of peace, did want a future without hatred. My father was using his hopes against him like a weapon. Now the personal touch that will guarantee he comes. My father's smile was sharp with anticipation. Tell him about the cubs. Kai's pen stopped moving. What cubs? The ones his precious daughter-in-law is supposedly carrying. Nothing brings out the protective instincts like imaginary grandchildren.
No.
Kai's voice was flat with revulsion. I won't lie about that. The blade sliced deeper, and I couldn't hold back my gasp of pain. Blood flowed more freely now, staining the collar of my dress crimson. You will, my father said softly, or she bleeds out right here on this desk. Kai's face went white as parchment. Sera, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay, I whispered, though each word sent fresh fire through my throat. Do what you have to do. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the quill as he added the final lie. There's something else, something that makes this alliance even more important. Sera is carrying my cubs, twins, the healer says. Your grandchildren, father. The next generation of Stormridge blood. Come to the stone circle tomorrow and meet your future family. The letter was finished, sealed with wax and Kai's own blood where my father had forced him to press his thumb to the seal. It was a masterpiece of deception, calculated to hit every emotional trigger that would make Alpha Garrett abandon caution and ride straight into a trap. Perfect, my father purred, carefully folding the letter. This will be delivered within the hour. I estimate your father will arrive at the stone circle with every warrior he can muster, probably around sunset tomorrow. You bastard, Kai breathed. Those warriors have families, children. Had, my father corrected with casual cruelty. By this time tomorrow, Moonhaven will be nothing but a memory. And you'll have the honor of watching it die. They dragged us back to our cell, the silver chains heavier than ever. Kai collapsed onto the narrow bed, his face buried in his hands as the full weight of what he'd done crashed down on him. 24 hours, he whispered. 24 hours, and everyone I've ever cared about will be dead because of me. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but the words felt hollow. We both knew the truth. The letter would work because it came from him, because his father loved him enough to risk everything for the chance of peace and grandchildren. There has to be something, I said, my voice hoarse from the silver cuts. Some way to warn them without my father knowing. But even as I spoke, I knew it was hopeless. The cell was watched constantly. The guards rotated every few hours to prevent bribery or sympathy. Even if we could somehow get word out, who would believe such an incredible story? Hours crawled by like days. We held each other in the growing darkness, both lost in our own private hells. Outside our window, I could hear the sounds of preparation, weapons being sharpened, horses being saddled, warriors gathering for what they believed would be a glorious victory. It was Luna who brought us dinner, her young face pale with worry as she slipped through the door with a tray of bread and watery soup. Sera, she whispered, glancing nervously at the guards outside. Are you okay? There's blood on your dress. I'm fine, little sister. The lie came easily, though my throat still burned from the silver cuts. What's happening out there? Father's called up every warrior in the pack. They're saying tomorrow will be the day Shadowcrest finally crushes Moonhaven once and for all. Her blue eyes filled with tears. But they're also saying Kai wrote a letter that will bring his father into a trap. Is that true? Kai's hands clenched into fists.
Yes.
It's true. But why? I thought you loved each other. We do. I reached out to stroke her hair, careful not to let the chains rattle too loudly. But sometimes love means making impossible choices. Luna stared at us for a long moment, her young mind working through the implications. There has to be something we can do. Some way to help. There isn't, sweetheart. This is bigger than any of us. But Luna's expression had changed, a look of stubborn determination replacing the tears. Maybe there is something. Father's so focused on tomorrow's battle, he's not paying attention to anything else. The border patrols have been pulled back to prepare for the attack. Kai's head snapped up. What are you thinking? I'm thinking a very fast wolf could reach Moonhaven territory before sunrise. If she knew the patrol routes, the safe paths through the mountains. Luna, no. I grabbed her hand through the bars. It's too dangerous. If Father finds out, he won't find out if I'm careful. And I owe them this much, don't I? Kai saved my life with those herbs. Maybe I can save his people. The idea was insane, desperate, and probably doomed to failure. Luna was barely 18, untrained in wilderness survival, and would be traveling alone through hostile territory. But as I looked into her determined blue eyes, I saw something that had been missing from our situation. Hope. You have to be very careful, Kai said slowly. Stay in wolf form, avoid the main paths, and whatever you do, don't let them capture you alive. If they bring you back to your father. I know. Luna's voice was steady despite her youth. But I can't just sit here and watch hundreds of innocent people die. Not when I might be able to stop it. The message has to be simple, I said, my mind racing through possibilities. Nothing that could be intercepted and traced back to us. Just enough to make them suspicious. What about the letter lies? Trust nothing. Stay away from the stone circle. Luna suggested. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. If Alpha Garrett had any lingering doubts about his son's miraculous change of heart, such a message might be the final push he needed to smell the trap. It could work, Kai admitted. But Luna, if you're caught, I won't be. She stood up, her small frame somehow radiating fierce determination. I'll leave after midnight, when the guard change happens. That should give me enough time to reach their territory before dawn. As she prepared to leave, I caught her hand one more time. Luna, if something goes wrong, if you can't make it back, I'll make it back. Her smile was brave and beautiful and terrified. Someone has to be here to help you to figure out your next impossible escape. Then she was gone, slipping out into the darkness like a ghost. Kai and I were alone again with our chains and our guilt and the terrible knowledge that we'd just sent a girl to do what trained warriors might not survive. She's going to die out there, Kai said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe she's going to save everyone. I pressed closer to him, drawing what comfort I could from his warmth. Either way, she's braver than both of us. Outside our window, the moon was rising. Not the blood moon of our first meeting, but a silver crescent that reminded me of Luna's bright courage. Somewhere in the darkness, my little sister was racing through the mountains, carrying the only hope Moonhaven had left. All we could do now was wait and pray that love and courage would be enough to overcome a lifetime of hatred. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight, each second bringing us closer to either salvation or apocalypse. Chapter 8. Luna's paws barely touched the ground as she raced through the darkness, her silver-white wolf form a ghost against the mountain shadows. Every muscle in her young body screamed with exhaustion, but she pushed harder, driven by the knowledge that hundreds of lives depended on her reaching Moonhaven before sunrise. Behind her, Shadowcrest territory fell away into memory. Ahead lay 20 miles of treacherous mountain terrain, patrolled by wolves who would kill her on sight if they discovered her true identity. But Luna had spent her childhood exploring these peaks with Sera, learning every hidden path and secret shortcut their father's patrols never bothered to check. Trust nothing, she repeated to herself as she leaped over a fallen log. The letter lies. Stay away from the stone circle. The message burned in her mind like a brand. It wasn't much, certainly not enough to explain the full scope of her father's betrayal, but it might be enough to plant doubt in Alpha Garrett's mind. Enough to make him hesitate, to question the impossible peace offering that had apparently come from his captive son. A branch snapped somewhere behind her, and Luna's heart froze. She flattened herself against the rocky ground, nose twitching as she tested the wind. Wolf scent, male, unfamiliar, definitely Moonhaven. One of their border patrols, probably investigating the sound of her passage. Please don't find me, she prayed silently. Not when I'm so close. The patrol wolf emerged from the trees 50 yards away, his dark gray coat blending with the shadows. He moved with the casual confidence of someone on his own territory, unaware that an enemy had already passed this way. Luna held her breath as he paused directly below her hiding spot, yellow eyes scanning the treeline. After what felt like an eternity, he moved on, disappearing into the forest with barely a whisper of sound. Luna waited another full minute before allowing herself to breathe again. The eastern horizon was beginning to show the faintest hint of gray when she finally reached the heart of Moonhaven territory. The main settlement sprawled across a broad valley, hundreds of wolves going about their early morning routines. Smoke rose from cooking fires, cubs played in the communal areas, and everywhere she looked, Luna saw the ordinary life that her father planned to destroy in less than 18 hours. But how could she approach them? A shadow-crest wolf walking into the center of their territory would be lucky to survive long enough to speak, let alone deliver a warning about treachery. The answer came from an unexpected source, a young Moonhaven female about her own age, gathering herbs near the forest edge. Luna had seen her before during the few diplomatic meetings between the packs, though they'd never spoken. Elena Riverstone, if she remembered correctly, daughter of Moonhaven's head healer. Luna shifted back to human form, grateful for the clothes she'd stuffed in her mouth during the run. She approached slowly, hands visible and empty, trying to project harmlessness instead of threat. "Elena," she called softly. The other girl spun around, her basket of herbs scattering as she recognized the intruder. "Luna Blackwood? What are you doing here? If the patrols find you, I need to speak to your father, Alpha Garrett. It's about Kai." Elena's green eyes widened with alarm. "What about Kai?" "The letter said he was safe, that he'd chosen to stay with your pack." "The letter lies." Luna stepped closer, desperation making her voice crack. "Please, Elena. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm telling you the truth. My father is planning an ambush at the stone circle. If your father goes to that meeting, he'll die." "You're lying." But uncertainty flickered in Elena's eyes. "Why would you warn us?" "Because Kai saved my life once, and because—" Luna's voice broke. "Because my sister loves him. She'd rather die than see his people slaughtered for her father's ambition." The two girls stared at each other across the space between their people's hatred, the weight of centuries of conflict pressing down on them. Finally, Elena made her decision. "Come with me." "But if this is some kind of trick—" "It's not. I swear on my sister's life, it's not." Alpha Garrett Stormridge was everything Luna had expected and nothing she'd prepared for. Tall and powerful like his son, with the same amber eyes and dark hair streaked with silver, he radiated the kind of authority that came from decades of just leadership. But when Elena brought Luna before him in his private study, those amber eyes blazed with barely controlled fury. "You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you executed as a spy," he growled, his hand resting on the silver blade at his belt. "Because I'm here to save your life." Luna forced herself to meet his gaze despite the fear clawing at her throat. "The letter from Kai, it's a lie. My father tortured him into writing it, used my sister as leverage to make him cooperate." "Impossible." The letter contained details only Kai would know. Personal memories he forced out of Kai before making him write. "The meeting at the stone circle is a trap, Alpha Garrett. My father has positioned warriors at every escape route. If you go there tomorrow night, you'll be walking into a massacre." The Alpha's face went through a series of complex emotions: disbelief, rage, calculation. Why should I believe you? You're a Blackwood, daughter of my greatest enemy. Because I'm also the sister of the woman your son loves. Because Kai gave me herbs to save my life when silver poisoning was killing me. Because Luna's voice cracked with exhaustion and emotion. Because I've run 20 miles through hostile territory to warn you, knowing that if I'm caught, my father will kill me slowly. The letter mentioned cubs, Alpha Garrett said slowly. Twins.
A lie.
One of many my father forced Kai to write. Luna pulled out a small piece of parchment, her own hastily scrawled message. This is what Kai would really say if he could. The truth he couldn't put in that letter. Alpha Garrett took the paper with trembling hands and read the words Luna had written during her desperate flight. Father, trust nothing from Shadowcrest. The piece is a lie, the cubs don't exist, and I would never abandon my pack willingly. If you receive this, it means Luna Blackwood risked everything to save us. The love between Sera and me is real, but everything else is Marcus's trap. Stay away from the stone circle.
Protect our people.
Your son. He didn't write this, the Alpha said quietly.
No.
I did. But it's what he would say if he could. Luna stepped closer, desperation making her bold. Alpha Garrett, please. I know my word means nothing to you, but look at the facts. When has my father ever offered peace? When has he ever shown mercy to his enemies? The letter promises everything you've ever wanted from Shadowcrest. Isn't that exactly why you should suspect it's too good to be true? The Alpha was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes, so like Kai's, studying her face as if he could read the truth written there. Finally, he spoke. If you're lying, if this is some elaborate scheme, then you'll know soon enough. But if I'm telling the truth and you ignore this warning, how many of your people will die for your skepticism? And if I don't go to the meeting, what happens to my son? The question Luna had been dreading, the one that made this warning a death sentence for the two people she loved most. My father will probably kill him. And Sera too, for being the reason you didn't fall for the trap. Alpha Garrett's hands clenched into fists. So I can save my pack or save my son, but not both. Maybe there's another way. Luna's mind raced through possibilities, desperate to find a solution that didn't require choosing between love and duty. What if you sent a small force to the stone circle, enough to make it look like you believe the letter, but not your main army? Meanwhile, you could be preparing for the real attack on Moonhaven territory. You think your father will attack here regardless? I think he's wanted this war for years, and Kai's capture just gave him the excuse he needed. If the trap at the stone circle fails, he'll find another way to justify invasion. The Alpha began pacing, his strategic mind working through the implications. It could work. A token force at the meeting, the main army positioned to defend our territory. But what about Kai? Leave that to me. The words came out before Luna could stop them, her protective instincts overriding common sense. I have to get back to Shadowcrest anyway. Maybe I can find a way to help them escape during the chaos. You're talking about going back into the wolf's den. Your father will be watching for any sign of betrayal. He'll be too focused on his war preparations to pay attention to his youngest daughter. And Sera needs to know that you got the warning, that Moonhaven won't be walking blindly into destruction. Alpha Garrett studied her for another long moment, then slowly nodded. You have more courage than wolves twice your age, Luna Blackwood. If you survive this war, you'll always be welcome in Moonhaven territory. If I survive this war, maybe our packs won't need separate territories anymore. Luna managed a tired smile. Maybe Sera and Kai's impossible love will prove that some things are stronger than hatred. Maybe. The Alpha's expression softened slightly. What do you need for the return journey? Just a head start. I need to be back before my father realizes I'm gone. But even as she spoke, Luna could see the sun rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The return journey would be even more dangerous than the approach. Shadowcrest patrols would be increasing as they prepared for war, and her extended absence might already have been noticed. Go, Alpha Garrett said, understanding the urgency. And Luna? Thank you. Whatever happens next, you've given my people a fighting chance. Luna shifted back to wolf form and bounded into the forest, her silver coat catching the morning light like spun moonbeams. Behind her, she could hear the Alpha already calling for his advisors, his voice carrying the authority of a leader preparing for war. The race back to Shadowcrest was a nightmare of exhaustion and terror. Every shadow might hide a patrol, every sound might herald discovery. But Luna pushed through the pain, driven by the knowledge that Sera and Kai were counting on her return, that their only hope lay in maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed. She made it back to her room just as the breakfast bell rang, collapsing onto her bed with barely enough strength to shift back to human form. Her muscles screamed with fatigue, her paws were bloody from the rocky terrain, and every breath felt like fire in her lungs. But she'd done it. Moonhaven knew the truth, and Alpha Garrett was preparing for the real war instead of walking blindly into a trap. Now came the hardest part, pretending to be the innocent little sister, while her father prepared to launch the bloodiest campaign in Pack history. And somehow, in the midst of all that chaos, finding a way to save the two people who taught her that love was stronger than hate. Outside her window, she could hear the sounds of preparation growing louder. Warriors gathering, weapons being distributed, horses being saddled for war. The final act was beginning, and Luna could only pray that love and courage would be enough to overcome a lifetime of carefully planned hatred. The clock on her wall showed noon. In 6 hours, her father would discover whether his trap had worked. In 6 hours, they'd all learn whether impossible love could change the world. Chapter 9. The afternoon dragged by with agonizing slowness, each hour bringing us closer to the moment when my father would discover his trap had failed. From our cell window, I could see Shadowcrest warriors making final preparations, sharpening weapons, checking armor, their faces bright with anticipation of the slaughter they believed awaited them at the stone circle. Kai sat beside me on the narrow cot, his amber eyes distant as he wrestled with guilt and helpless rage. "They're going to die because of me," he said for the 100th time. "That letter, those lies I wrote, will save your people's lives," I finished firmly. Luna made it back, Kai. I saw her at lunch, exhausted but trying to act normal. That means she reached her father in time. You don't know that for certain. I know my sister. She has our mother's courage and twice the determination. I took his chained hands in mine, feeling the burn of silver, but not caring. She wouldn't have returned if she'd failed. A commotion in the courtyard below made us both move to the window. My father stood in the center of a ring of his most trusted warriors, his scarred face animated with vicious pleasure as he outlined the evening's battle plan. "Remember," his voice carried clearly through the still air, "we want survivors from the first wave. I need prisoners to interrogate, to learn every secret Moonhaven has been hiding. The real slaughter comes after we've bled them of information." Razor, recently returned from the healers with bandages covering the wounds I'd given him, raised his hand. "What about the Stormridge pup, Alpha? Do we kill him after his father dies?" My father's smile was sharp as winter ice. "Oh no. Kai Stormridge has a front row seat to watch his pack's destruction. After that," he shrugged eloquently, "we'll see how long it takes him to beg for death." Kai's hands clenched into fists, his whole body radiating barely controlled fury. "I'm going to kill him. When this is over, I'm going to tear out his throat with my bare hands." "Get in line," I muttered, but my attention was caught by movement at the edge of the courtyard. Luna stood in the shadows near the stable, her young face pale but determined as she watched our father's war preparations. When she caught sight of us at the window, she gave the tiniest nod, so small anyone else would have missed it. The message was clear. It's done. Moonhaven knows. Relief flooded through me so powerfully, I nearly collapsed. Whatever happened next, at least Kai's people wouldn't walk blindly into massacre. Alpha Garrett would be ready for the real attack, prepared to defend his territory instead of riding into an obvious trap. "Your father knows," I whispered to Kai. Luna got through. His amber eyes blazed with sudden hope. "Are you certain? Look at her. She's barely standing, exhausted from the journey, but she's trying to act normal for father's benefit." I squeezed his hands tighter. "She saved them, Kai. Your pack is going to survive this." But we're still trapped here. When your father discovers the trap failed, when he realizes someone warned Moonhaven, we'll figure it out. The words came out more confidently than I felt. We've made it this far. We're not giving up now. The sun was setting when Thorn appeared at our cell door, his silver eyes bright with malicious anticipation. Time for the show, lovebirds. The Alpha wants you both to watch the stone circle from the North Tower. They dragged us up 3 flights of stairs to the highest point in the compound, where my father had set up an observation post complete with spyglasses and comfortable chairs. The irony wasn't lost on me. He wanted us to have the best possible view of what he believed would be the massacre of Kai's family. Excellent timing, my father said without turning around as we were chained to chairs near the window. The first of your father's wolves should be arriving any moment now. Through the spyglass, I could see the stone circle clearly, ancient standing stones arranged in a perfect ring, with the agreed-upon meeting spot in the center. My father's warriors were positioned in the surrounding forest, invisible to anyone approaching from the traditional path. There. My father's voice was thick with satisfaction. Right on schedule. A small group of Moonhaven wolves emerged from the tree line, perhaps a dozen riders led by a figure I recognized as Beta Thomas Riverstone. They moved cautiously, clearly suspicious, but they were still coming to the meeting. Where's Alpha Garrett? Kai demanded, his voice tight with worry. Probably hanging back with the main force, my father replied. Standard tactical procedure, send the expendables first to test for ambush. But as the minutes ticked by and no larger force appeared, my father's expression began to change. The dozen Moonhaven wolves had formed a defensive circle around the meeting stone, clearly waiting, but they showed no signs of the confidence that should come with overwhelming numbers. Where are the rest? Thorn muttered, his own spyglass trained on the tree line. Intelligence said Garrett would bring at least 50 warriors. Maybe they're better hidden than we thought, one of the other observers suggested, but doubt was creeping into his voice. Another hour passed. The Moonhaven delegation waited patiently in their defensive formation, but no reinforcements appeared. As full darkness fell and the appointed meeting time came and went, the truth became undeniable. It's a countertrap, my father said slowly, his voice deadly quiet. They know. The accusation in his eyes, when he turned to look at us, made my blood freeze. Someone warned them. Someone betrayed the plan. That's impossible, Thorn protested. The letter was perfect, completely convincing. And yet there are only 12 wolves at the stone circle instead of 50. My father's gaze shifted between Kai and me like a predator, selecting his prey. The question is, which of my 2 prisoners managed to get word out? Kai straightened in his chains, meeting my father's stare with defiant courage. Maybe your intelligence was wrong. Maybe Alpha Garrett isn't the fool you thought he was. Or maybe, my father said softly, drawing his silver blade, someone in this room has been very, very stupid. The blade flashed toward Kai's throat, but I threw myself forward as far as my chains would allow. Wait. If you kill him now, you'll never know how the message got out. Torture him all you want, he was chained in a cell under constant guard. How could he possibly have contacted his pack? My father paused, the blade hovering inches from Kai's jugular. A valid point. So, if not him, then who? His eyes narrowed as he studied my face. You perhaps? Did Daddy's little princess find a way to play hero? I was chained right beside him the entire time. You know that. Yes, I do. Which means our traitor is someone else entirely. He lowered the blade, but didn't sheath it. Someone with access to Moonhaven territory. Someone young and foolish enough to risk everything for a pair of star-crossed lovers. My heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, he'd figured out Luna's involvement. Thorn, my father called without taking his eyes off me. Bring me my youngest daughter. Now. No. The word tore from my throat like a physical thing. Leave her alone. She has nothing to do with this. Doesn't she? His smile was sharp as broken glass. You should see your face, Serafina. Guilt written in every line. Your precious sister played messenger, didn't she? Sweet little Luna, risking her life to save the enemy. Footsteps echoed on the stairs, and moments later Thorn appeared dragging Luna between two guards. She looked so small and fragile compared to the massive warriors, but her blue eyes blazed with the same stubborn courage that had carried her across 20 miles of hostile territory. "Hello, father," she said quietly. "I hear you've discovered my midnight run. You stupid, reckless child." His voice was ice and fire combined. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I saved innocent lives. I prevented a massacre." Luna's chin came up in a gesture I recognized, the same defiance Sera and I had inherited from our mother. "I'm not sorry. You will be." My father tested the edge of his blade against his thumb, drawing a thin line of blood. "You've cost me a war, child. Cost me the chance to finally crush our ancient enemies. That kind of betrayal demands a very special punishment." "Don't touch her." Kai's roar filled the chamber, his chains clinking as he struggled against them. "She's just a kid. She's a traitor. And traitors die." The blade rose, candlelight running along its silver edge like liquid fire. But before he could strike, a new sound echoed through the night, the deep, resonant howl of a war horn, followed by answering calls from a dozen different directions. My father spun toward the window, his face going white with shock. "That's impossible," he breathed. Through the darkness, points of light were appearing on the mountainsides, torches carried by what looked like hundreds of wolves, all converging on Shadowcrest territory from multiple directions. The real Moonhaven army wasn't walking into our trap at the stone circle. They were bringing the war to us.
Attack.
Thorn shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "The compound is under siege." My father stood frozen for a moment, his careful plans crumbling around him like sand castles before the tide. Then his expression hardened into something truly terrifying, the face of a man with nothing left to lose. "If I can't have victory," he snarled, raising the silver blade toward Luna's throat, "I'll settle for revenge." "Father, no," I screamed, throwing my whole weight against the chains. But the blade was already falling, silver gleaming like a falling star in the candlelight. Luna closed her eyes, brave to the end, ready to die for the love she'd helped save. The impact, when it came, wasn't what any of us expected. Kai's chair crashed into my father's back with bone-breaking force, the Moonhaven wolf having somehow snapped his silver chains through sheer desperate strength. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs and fury, the blade spinning away across the stone floor. "Run!" Kai shouted to Luna as he grappled with my father. "Get out of here!" But Luna was already moving, not toward the door but toward me, her small hands working frantically at my chains. "Not without you," she gasped. "Not without both of you." Outside, the sounds of battle were growing closer, snarls and howls, and the ring of steel on steel as two armies that had hated each other for generations finally met in open war. The siege of Shadowcrest had begun, and somewhere in that chaos lay our only chance for freedom. If we could survive the next few minutes. My father's fist connected with Kai's jaw, sending him sprawling, and the Alpha lunged for his fallen blade with murderous intent. "This ends now," he roared, silver gleaming in his hand. But as he raised the weapon for a killing blow, the chamber door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. Alpha Kai Stormridge stood in the breach, flanked by a dozen Moonhaven warriors, his amber eyes blazing with paternal fury. "Get away from my son," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. The final battle had come to us.
Chapter 10.
The tower chamber erupted into chaos as two alphas faced each other across decades of hatred, their wolves bristling with barely contained violence. Kai Stormridge stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, his amber eyes blazing with the fury of a father whose child had been threatened. Behind him, Moonhaven warriors filled the stairwell, their weapons gleaming in the candlelight. "You have 10 seconds to release my son," Garrett commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of an alpha in his prime. "After that, I stopped being civilized." My father wiped blood from a split lip, his silver blade still clutched in his hand. "Civilized? You bring an army to my home and call it civilized. You tortured my heir, forced him to write lies that would have led to massacre, and threatened to murder innocents. Garrett's hand moved to the sword at his hip. I call it justice. Justice. My father's laugh was sharp with hysteria. You want to talk about justice? Your pack killed my mate 20 years ago. Sera and Luna's mother died because of Moonhaven arrows. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Our mother's death had always been blamed on rogue hunters, a tragic accident during a routine patrol. But the raw pain in my father's voice, the way his facade of control finally cracked, told a different story. She was carrying supplies to refugees from the winter floods, he continued, his voice breaking. Pregnant women and children from both our packs, starving in the mountains. And your warriors shot her down like a rabid animal because she was on the wrong side of some invisible line. Alpha Garrett's expression shifted, anger giving way to something that might have been shame. Marcus, that was a mistake. A tragic misunderstanding by young warriors who were following your orders to shoot first and ask questions later. My father's control shattered completely, 20 years of buried grief pouring out like blood from a wound. Helena died believing in peace between our packs. She died trying to help your people. And you stand there talking about justice. The chamber fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle below. In that moment, I finally understood the poison that had consumed my father's heart, the reason he'd become the monster who could threaten his own daughters. He wasn't born evil. He was broken, twisted by grief and guilt into something unrecognizable. Father, I whispered, my voice cracking with sympathy I'd never expected to feel. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. He turned to me with eyes full of anguish. How could I tell you that your mother died? Because I let her go alone. Because I was too proud to escort her myself, too concerned with appearing weak before my warriors. Kai struggled to his feet, blood from his broken chains painting his wrists crimson. This doesn't have to continue, he said quietly. The cycle of revenge, the endless bloodshed, it can stop here. Tonight. Stop. My father's laugh was bitter as winter wind. It stops when every Moonhaven wolf is dead. When I've balanced the scales for Helena's blood. Helena wouldn't have wanted this, Luna said, stepping forward despite the danger. Her young voice carried surprising authority as she faced down the man who'd raised her. She died trying to help people, trying to bridge the gap between our packs. How does starting a war honor her memory? What would you know about it? You were barely walking when she died. I know what Sera told me. How Mother used to sing lullabies about wolves from different packs playing together under the same moon. How she dreamed of a world where love mattered more than bloodlines. Luna's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. She loved you, Father. But she also loved peace. And right now, you're destroying everything she died for. For a moment, something flickered in my father's eyes. The man he'd been before grief consumed him, the alpha who'd once loved a female brave enough to risk everything for strangers. But then the moment passed, and the monster returned. Pretty words, he snarled, raising the silver blade. But words don't bring back the dead. He lunged toward Alpha Garrett with desperate fury, the blade aimed at the heart of his oldest enemy. But Kai was faster, throwing himself between them with the same protective instinct that had saved Luna minutes before. The silver pierced his chest with a wet, meaty sound that made my heart stop. Kai gasped, his amber eyes wide with shock as crimson spread across his shirt. He swayed for a moment, then collapsed to his knees. Kai! His father's roar of anguish shook the stone walls. No! My scream tore from my throat as I fought against my chains with superhuman strength. The silver burned through skin and muscle, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered except reaching him, holding him, keeping his life from flowing away across the cold stones. My father stared at the blade in his hand as if he couldn't understand how it had gotten there. He wasn't supposed to. Alpha Garrett was beside his son in an instant, his powerful hands pressing against the wound to stem the bleeding. Stay with me, pup. Don't you dare leave me now. Father, Kai whispered, his voice barely audible. The packs, they don't have to hate anymore. Save your strength. We're getting you out of here. But even as he spoke, more blood poured between his fingers. The blade had gone deep, possibly hitting the heart, and we all knew there was no healer skilled enough to repair such damage. My father's reflexive strike had achieved what 20 years of careful planning couldn't: the death of the Moonhaven heir. I can save him. The voice came from the doorway, soft but carrying absolute conviction. Elena Riverstone pushed through the crowd of warriors, her healer's bag clutched in her hands. But I need everyone to step back and let me work. Elena, no. Her own father protested. The wound is too severe. I said I can save him. Her green eyes blazed with determination as she knelt beside Kai's fallen form. But it requires a blood bond, a sharing of life force between willing partners. Someone has to be willing to risk their own life to anchor his spirit. Without hesitation, I broke the last of my silver chains through sheer desperate strength.
Me.
I'll do it. Sera, you don't understand, Elena said urgently. If the bond fails, you both die. If it succeeds, you'll be connected for life. True mates in every sense of the word, unable to survive without each other. I can't survive without him anyway. I collapsed beside Kai, taking his hand in mine despite the silver burns covering my wrists. Do it. The ritual requires consent from both parties. Kai's eyes fluttered open, focusing on my face with obvious effort. Yes, he whispered. Whatever the cost, yes. Elena began chanting in the old tongue, her hands glowing with soft silver light as she worked. Ancient magic filled the chamber, older than pack rivalries, older than the hatred that had consumed our fathers. This was the power that had first awakened the wolf spirits in human hearts, the force that bound all our people together regardless of bloodline. I felt the moment the bond took hold, a rush of sensation as Kai's life force intertwined with mine, his pain becoming my pain, his strength flowing into him from my own heart. The silver blade wound began to close, flesh knitting together under Elena's skilled touch, but I could feel my own life energy draining away to fuel his healing. Around us, the chamber had fallen silent. Wolves from both packs watched in awe as love literally conquered death, as two young people risked everything for a chance to rewrite the future. It's working, Elena breathed, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort of channeling so much power. The wound is closing, his heart is strengthening. But I could feel the cost. My vision was blurring, my own heartbeat growing erratic as more of my life force flowed into Kai. I was dying to save him, and I couldn't bring myself to regret the choice. Sera, Kai's voice was stronger now, panic replacing weakness, as he felt what the bond was doing to me. Stop this. I won't let you die for me. Not dying, I managed to whisper. Just choosing love over fear. My father's broken voice cut through the magical tension. Helena? Helena, is that you? I looked up through fading vision to see him staring at me with wonder and terror, as if seeing a ghost. For a moment, I understood what he was seeing, his mate's face reflected in mine, her courage and compassion burning bright in her daughter's sacrifice. She forgave you, I told him, the words coming from some deep well of certainty. Mother never blamed you for her death. She blamed the hatred, the fear, the inability to see past old wounds to new possibilities. Tears streamed down his scarred face. I've become a monster. Everything she stood against. Not too late, Luna said softly, moving to his side. It's never too late to choose love over hate. The healing magic reached its peak, and suddenly I could breathe again. Strength flowed back into my limbs as the bond stabilized, no longer draining my life but sharing it, creating something stronger than either of us could be alone. Kai sat up, his hand moving to his chest where only a thin silver scar remained of the mortal wound. It worked. Elena, you saved us both. You saved each other, she corrected with a tired smile. I just provided the framework. Alpha Garrett helped his son to his feet, his amber eyes bright with unshed tears. When you were dying, you said the Pax didn't have to hate anymore. Did you mean it? I meant every word. Kai's hand found mine, our bond humming with shared strength and purpose. This war has cost us all too much. It's time to choose a different path. All eyes turned to my father, the man who'd started this conflict, who had the power to end it. He stood in the center of the chamber like a broken statue, the silver blade fallen from his nerveless fingers. "Marcus," Alpha Garrett said quietly, "your daughter just proved that love is stronger than death itself. Maybe it's time we proved that forgiveness is stronger than revenge." My father looked at each of us in turn, his daughters who'd risked everything for peace, the enemy heir who'd sacrificed himself to protect others, the alpha who'd shown mercy when he could have demanded blood. Finally, his gaze settled on me, and I saw Helena's memory burning bright in his eyes. "The war is over," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Helena's daughters have shown me that some things are worth more than victory." Outside, the sounds of battle were already fading as word of the ceasefire spread through both armies. In the morning, there would be negotiations, treaties, the hard work of building peace from the ashes of hatred. But tonight, in this tower chamber where love had conquered death and forgiveness had defeated revenge, the impossible had become inevitable. Kai and I were bonded for life, our love finally free to flourish without fear or shame. And in choosing each other over duty, we'd somehow managed to save everyone we held dear. The blood moon was setting over the mountains, its crimson light giving way to the silver promise of dawn. A new day was coming for both our packs, one built on love instead of fear, hope instead of hatred. Some things really were stronger than the chains of the past. Chapter 11. 3 months later, I stood at the edge of the meadow where Kai and I had first kissed, watching the sun rise over what had once been the most heavily fortified border in the supernatural world. The guard towers were gone now, torn down by joint crews from both packs and replaced with a simple stone arch inscribed with words that would have been impossible just a season ago. "Welcome to the United Territories of Moonhaven and Shadowcrest." "You're up early." Kai's voice was warm with sleep and contentment as his arms circled my waist from behind. Even after 3 months of freedom, I still marveled at being able to touch him without fear, to feel his love flowing through our bond like sunlight through crystal. Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about. I leaned back against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid warmth. Today changes everything. Today was our official mating ceremony. Not the forced travesty my father had planned with Victor Ironclad, but a true celebration of love chosen freely. Representatives from 12 different packs would attend, witnessing the union that had ended the longest-running feud in werewolf history. Having second thoughts? Kai teased, but I could feel the undercurrent of genuine concern through our bond. Never. I turned in his arms, rising on my toes to brush my lips against his. Though I do wonder if our children will believe the story when we tell them how we met. "You mean the part where you were ready to die for your sister's medicine, or the part where I was supposed to kill you on sight?" "The part where we fell in love in about 30 seconds despite having every reason to hate each other." Kai's laugh was rich with joy. "They'll believe it. How could they not, when they'll grow up in a world where such things are possible?" Movement in the valley below caught our attention. Early morning travelers using the new trade route that connected our territories. Merchants, craftsmen, families visiting relatives they hadn't seen in decades, all moving freely across land that had once been a battlefield. "I do," my father replied, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "And I do so gladly, knowing she has found a mate worthy of her courage and love." He placed my hand in Kai's, and the simple touch sent sparks of electricity through our bond. We were already connected in every way that mattered, but the formal ceremony would make it official in the eyes of the world. "The bonds you forged today," Alpha Garrett continued, "are not just between two hearts, but between two peoples. Let your love be a bridge across every divide, your partnership a promise that understanding can triumph over fear." The vows we'd written ourselves, words that came from hearts that had already been through more than most couples faced in a lifetime. "Sera," Kai began, his voice rough with emotion, "you taught me that some things are worth any risk, any sacrifice. You showed me that love isn't weakness, but the greatest strength of all. I promise to stand beside you through every challenge, to support your dreams even when they seem impossible, and to love you with every breath I take until my heart stops beating. My own vows came through tears of joy. Kai, you saw past everything that should have made us enemies to the heart of who I really am. You chose to trust when trust was madness, to hope when hope seemed futile. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face whatever comes with courage drawn from our bond, and to love you not just for who you are, but for who we become together. The ancient rings were forged from silver and moonstone, blessed by pack elders and inscribed with runes that bound our souls as well as our lives. When Kai slipped mine onto my finger, I felt the final piece of my heart click into place. By the power vested in me by ancient law and pack tradition, Alpha Garrett declared, I pronounce you eternally bonded, mated for life under moon and stars. What love has joined, let no force divide. The kiss that sealed our union tasted like forever, sweet with promise, warm with passion, bright with the certainty that we'd found our other half. Around us, the crowd erupted in celebration, voices raised in traditional howls of joy that echoed across the mountains. But through the noise and excitement, I heard something else, a sound that would have been impossible just months ago. Wolves from both our packs, howling together in perfect harmony, their voices blending like their lives were slowly blending into something beautiful and new. As Kai and I broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, I caught sight of Luna dancing with Elena while our fathers shared what looked like an actual friendly conversation. Beyond them, cubs played together in the grass while their parents watched with wonder instead of fear. So, Kai murmured against my ear, ready to change the world, Mrs. Stormridge Blackwood? I laughed, joy bubbling up from the deepest part of my soul. With you? I'm ready for anything. The blood moon had set long ago, its crimson light replaced by the golden warmth of a new dawn. And in that light, impossible things were finally becoming inevitable. Our love story was complete, but the greatest adventure was just beginning.
Chapter 12.
The nursery was bathed in silver moonlight as I rocked our daughter to sleep, her tiny fist wrapped around my finger with the same determination that had driven me to cross enemy lines for love. Artemis had inherited Kai's amber eyes and my stubborn streak, along with an alpha's natural confidence that already had the pack elders predicting great things for her future. She's fighting sleep again, Kai observed from the doorway, his voice warm with affection as he watched us. Even after 5 years of marriage, my heart still skipped when he looked at me like that, as if I were the most precious thing in his world. Just like her father, I murmured, pressing a kiss to our daughter's dark curls. Remember how you used to stay awake all night planning impossible rescues? Those rescues weren't impossible. They were just ambitious. He crossed the room to join us, his large hand gentle as he stroked Artemis's cheek. Besides, look how well that particular ambition turned out. Through our bond, I felt his contentment mixed with anticipation. Today marked the 5th anniversary of the pack unification, and tomorrow we'd host representatives from the 7 territories that had followed our example, ending feuds that stretched back generations. What had started as 2 young wolves falling in love despite every reason not to had become a movement that reshaped the entire supernatural world. The council meeting went well? I asked as Artemis finally surrendered to sleep. Better than well. The Western Alliance officially voted to adopt our integration model. Kai's smile was bright with pride. That's 15 territories now choosing cooperation over conflict. Helena's dream is spreading faster than we ever imagined. I placed our daughter in her crib, the moonlight catching the mobile overhead, tiny silver wolves that danced in the breeze, representing all the packs that had found peace through love instead of war. Beside Artemis's crib stood a second, still empty but waiting. Our son was due in 3 months, and the healers assured us he'd be just as strong and stubborn as his sister. Speaking of dreams, Kai said, wrapping his arms around me from behind, I have news that might interest you. Good news or complicated news? Both. His laugh rumbled through his chest, vibrating against my back. Luna and Elena have officially announced their mating bond. I spun in his arms, joy and surprise flooding through me.
When? How?
They've been dancing around each other for months. Apparently, Elena finally got tired of waiting for Luna to make the first move. Proposed right there in the middle of the Healing Academy, in front of 50 students and half the pack council. And Luna said yes? Luna said, and I quote, "About damn time, you beautiful disaster. I thought I was going to have to draw you a map." We both dissolved into laughter, trying to keep quiet so we wouldn't wake Artemis. My little sister had grown into a remarkable woman, a skilled diplomat who'd personally negotiated 3-peace treaties, and a gifted healer who'd trained under Elena's guidance. But when it came to matters of the heart, she'd always been hopeless. "There's more," Kai continued once we'd gotten our giggles under control. "Your father wants to officiate the ceremony." That stopped me cold. Father? Officiating a same-sex mating. Apparently, he said, and again I quote, "Love is love, and anyone who thinks otherwise can kiss my alpha ass." The transformation in my father over the past 5 years had been nothing short of miraculous. The broken, bitter man who'd nearly destroyed everything had evolved into a leader who championed love in all its forms. He'd even started a foundation in Helena's name, providing aid to refugees and war orphans regardless of pack affiliation. Helena would be so proud, I whispered, thinking of the mother I'd never really known but whose legacy lived on in every choice our family made. She'd be proud of all of us. Kai's hand moved to rest on my growing belly, where our son kicked with enthusiastic approval. Her daughters are changing the world, her husband has found his way back to love, and her grandchildren will grow up in the peace she died trying to create. A soft knock at the nursery door interrupted our tender moment. Alpha Garrett peeked inside, his amber eyes twinkling with grandfatherly mischief. "Sorry to disturb, but we have visitors," he said quietly. The delegation from the northern reaches arrived early. Kai and I exchanged glances. The northern reaches were one of the most isolated and traditional territories, their pack structure virtually unchanged for centuries. If they were seriously considering our integration model, it would represent a massive shift in supernatural politics. "Go," I told Kai, straightening his shirt and smoothing his hair. "I'll join you as soon as I check on the other children." The pack nursery had expanded dramatically over the years, filled with cubs from both original territories and new arrivals who'd sought sanctuary in our united lands. Tonight, dozens of little ones slept peacefully under the watchful eye of volunteer caregivers, their different bloodlines mixing freely in ways that would have been unthinkable just years ago. As I made my way to the Great Hall, I could hear the sounds of animated conversation, voices raised not in anger, but in excited debate about trade routes, educational exchanges, and joint military training. The hall itself had been completely rebuilt, its walls decorated with artwork representing all the cultures that had found a home here. The northern delegation was impressive, 12 wolves in traditional furs and silver, led by a stern-faced woman whose reputation for ruthless pragmatism preceded her. Alpha Vera Frostborn had ruled the Reaches for 30 years without once allowing outsiders into her territory. "Seraphina," she said, inclining her head respectfully as I entered. "Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Alpha Frostborn. We're honored by your visit."
Direct.
I like that. Her smile was sharp but not unfriendly. "Let me be equally direct. My pack elders believe your integration model is a fantasy, doomed to collapse the moment you face real adversity. I'm here to see if they're right. And if they are, then we go home, close our borders, and continue as we have for centuries." Her pale eyes studied me with uncomfortable intensity. "But if they're wrong, if you've truly created something sustainable here, well, the Northern Reaches has some very old enemies who might be interested in a new approach to conflict resolution." The implications sent a thrill through me. The Reaches bordered 3 territories locked in a centuries-old 3-way war that had claimed thousands of lives. If Alpha Frostborn could be convinced to broker peace talks, what would you like to see first? Kai asked, moving to stand beside me with the unconscious synchronization that still amazed visitors. "Everything," Alpha Frostborn replied firmly. I want to observe your joint training exercises, sit in on council meetings, visit your schools and healing centers. Most importantly, I want to speak with your people, not the leaders, but the ordinary pack members who live with the consequences of your choices. Over the next 3 days, we gave her exactly what she asked for. Alpha Frostborn attended strategy sessions where former enemies planned joint operations, watched Shadowcrest and Moonhaven Cubs learn side by side in our integrated school, and even participated in the evening hunts where wolves from both packs ran together under the stars. But it was the small moments that seemed to affect her most. Luna and Elena holding hands during a council meeting, my father playing with Artemis while discussing trade agreements, the casual way pack members switched between territories as if the old borders had never existed. On her final evening, she found Kai and me in our private garden, sharing a quiet moment while Artemis played at our feet. Our daughter had inherited our shared fearlessness, trotting boldly toward the delegation with the absolute confidence that she'd be welcomed. Hello, little Alpha, Alpha Frostborn said, crouching to Artemis's level. And what's your opinion of all this peace and cooperation? Artemis studied the stern northern Alpha with serious amber eyes, then offered her favorite toy, a small wooden wolf carved by her grandfather Marcus. It was a gesture of pure innocence, the kind of trust that only came from growing up in a world where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Alpha Frostborn accepted the toy with surprising gentleness, her weathered face softening as she examined the intricate carving. Your grandfather made this? Gamma, Artemis said proudly, using her pet name for Marcus. He makes wolves for all the babies. Does he now? The Alpha's eyes lifted to meet mine over Artemis's head. The same man who once vowed to wipe Moonhaven from the map now carves toys for children of both bloodlines? Love changes people, I said simply. Sometimes it takes tragedy to open our hearts, but once they're open, the transformation can be miraculous. Alpha Frostborn was quiet for a long moment, watching as Artemis returned to her play with the unself-conscious joy of a child who'd never known hatred or fear of the other. I came here expecting to find a beautiful lie, she said finally. A facade that would crumble under scrutiny. Instead, I've found something far more dangerous. Dangerous? Kai asked, tension creeping into his voice. Hope. Her smile was wry, but genuine. The most dangerous thing of all, because once you've seen it working, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the old ways and pretend they're the only option. She stood, brushing grass from her traditional furs, and extended her hand to both of us. The Northern Reaches formally requests mediation services for the 3-territory conflict. We're prepared to host peace talks on neutral ground, with your pack providing oversight and guidance. The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility. The 3-territory conflict was the bloodiest ongoing war in the supernatural world, responsible for more deaths than any other dispute. If we could broker peace there, we'd be honored to help, I said, grasping her offered hand. As the Northern delegation prepared to leave the next morning, Alpha Frostborn pulled me aside for a private word. Your daughter will inherit a very different world than the one you were born into, she observed. One with more hope but also more responsibility. The changes you've set in motion, they'll ripple out for generations. I know. I watched Artemis chase butterflies in the garden, her laughter bright as silver bells. Sometimes it terrifies me, the weight of what we've started. But then I remember that fear is what kept our parents trapped in cycles of hatred. I won't let fear limit what our children can become. Wise words. Alpha Frostborn's expression grew thoughtful. There's something else. The Council of Alphas is considering a formal proposal, a continental alliance based on your integration model. If it passes, how many territories would be involved? All of them. Every pack from the Arctic Circle to the southern deserts, united under a single charter of cooperation. She paused, studying my shocked expression. The vote is next month. Both you and Kai have been nominated to head the implementation committee. The magnitude of what she was describing took my breath away. A continental alliance would mean an end to pack warfare, the establishment of unified laws and trade agreements, the creation of a truly integrated supernatural society. "It's what Helena dreamed of," I whispered.
Yes.
"And it's what you and your mate made possible." Alpha Frostborn's stern facade cracked, revealing genuine warmth beneath. "Love really can change the world, Serafina. You've proven that beyond any doubt." That evening, as Kai and I stood on our balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, I felt the weight and wonder of everything we'd accomplished together. "Nervous about the Continental Alliance?" he asked, his arm tightening around my waist. "Terrified," I admitted, "but also excited. Imagine it, Kai, our children growing up in a world without pack wars, where love isn't forbidden just because it crosses bloodlines. A world where two young wolves can meet under a blood moon and fall in love without fearing for their lives." "Exactly." I leaned into his warmth, our bond humming with shared dreams and determination. Though hopefully future lovers won't have to go through quite so much drama to get their happy ending. His laugh was rich with joy and memory. Where would be the fun in that? Artemis appeared in the doorway, trailing her favorite blanket and looking for bedtime cuddles. Kai scooped her up, settling her between us as we watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Tell me about the blood moon," she demanded, as she did every night. "Once upon a time," I began, the familiar words warm with love and promise. "There were two young wolves who should have been enemies, but chose to be everything to each other instead." As I told our story, our impossible, incredible, world-changing love story, I felt the presence of everyone who'd made this moment possible. Helena's spirit in the gentle breeze, my father's laughter echoing from the great hall below, Luna and Elena planning their future with the same fearless hope that had carried Kai and me through our darkest hours. The blood moon might have set long ago, but its legacy lived on in every choice we made, every boundary we crossed, every love we chose to celebrate instead of condemn. Some things really were stronger than fear. Some loves really were worth any risk. And some happily ever afters were just the beginning of an even greater adventure. Under the silver light of 1,000 stars, our story became legend, and our legend became hope for all the impossible loves yet to come. The end.